At dawn on September 1st, 1939, German forces launched Blitzkrieg. The forces stormed into Poland, attacking from the west, north, and south. The assault was swift, brutal, and unlike anything seen before. Within hours, tanks, planes, and motorized infantry ripped through Polish defenses. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, marking the official beginning of World War II. By the end of September 1939, Poland lay in ruins. In just weeks, the German Blitzkrieg had overrun the country, its cities bombed, its defenses shattered. But as Polish forces fought desperately in the west, a new enemy appeared in the east. On September 17, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the opposite side. This invasion was not a surprise to Hitler. It was part of a secret agreement signed before the war began, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Officially, the pact was a non-aggression treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union. But behind it was a secret protocol, a plan to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Germany would take the western half of Poland, while the Soviets would occupy the east. As German and Soviet troops advanced, Polish resistance collapsed. By the end of the month, the country was split in two, erased from the map once again. For now, Hitler and Stalin were uneasy partners, but it would not last. On June 22, 1941, without warning, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union, the largest invasion in history. At 3:15 a.m., German artillery thundered across a front stretching nearly 3,000 kilometers. Wave after wave of Luftwaffe bombers struck Soviet airfields, railways, and communication lines. Within hours, 1,000 Soviet aircraft had been destroyed, most before they ever left the ground. 3 massive army groups poured across the border. Army Group North, under Wilhelm von Lieb, drove toward Leningrad. Army Group Center, led by Fedor von Bock, surged toward Moscow. And Army Group South, commanded by Gerd von Rundstedt, targeted the fertile lands and oil of Ukraine. In just weeks, entire Soviet armies were encircled and annihilated. The Red Army was unprepared. Stalin had ignored intelligence warnings, convinced Hitler wouldn't dare attack so soon. When the invasion began, chaos erupted. Soviet command structures collapsed, communication lines broke, and entire divisions vanished under the storm of Blitzkrieg. Still, pockets of resistance emerged, places like Brest Fortress, where surrounded soldiers fought to the last bullet. But courage alone could not stop the German war machine. By July, the Germans had captured Minsk and Smolensk, taking hundreds of thousands of prisoners. As the German armies pushed deeper, Stalin ordered a brutal policy: scorched earth. Anything the enemy could use had to be destroyed. Factories, farms, railways, all set ablaze. If the Red Army could not hold the land, they would make sure the Germans couldn't use it either. It was a desperate move, one that bought time, but left millions of civilians starving and homeless. To Hitler and his generals, victory seemed certain. Inside the Kremlin, panic spread. The Red Army was collapsing. Cities were falling. Stalin, once defiant, now faced the possibility that the Soviet Union itself could be destroyed. But in this moment of crisis, he turned to one man, Commander Georgy Zhukov. Born in 1896, in a small peasant village south of Moscow, Zhukov knew hardship from an early age. He joined the army during World War I, survived revolution and civil war, and rose through the ranks. And just as the German advance began to falter, Zhukov arrived in Moscow to take command of the defense. Zhukov transformed chaos into order. He reinforced Moscow's defenses with trenches, anti-tank barriers, and artillery rings. He ordered fresh divisions from the Siberian front, hardened troops trained for the bitter cold. Under his leadership, morale returned. The city would not fall. By early December 1941, German forces were within 30 kilometers of Moscow, close enough to see the glow of the Kremlin through the snow. But they could go no further. On December 5th, Zhukov struck back. Zhukov launched a large-scale counteroffensive along the entire Moscow front. It involved more than 1 million Soviet soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft. The attack caught the Germans by surprise. The Red Army advanced on several fronts, pushing back the overstretched German lines. Soviet forces liberated towns such as Klin, Kaluga, and Tula in the following weeks. The German army, already suffering from the cold and supply shortages, could not hold their positions. They were forced into retreat, the first major withdrawal of the war for Hitler's forces. For the first time since the war began, the Red Army was on the attack. The Soviet counterattack stopped the German advance toward Moscow and ended Hitler's hopes of defeating the USSR in 1941. It was a turning point, the first major defeat for Nazi Germany in World War II. However, the Soviet victory did not come easily. The Red Army also suffered heavy losses, and many soldiers died from exposure and exhaustion. The front stabilized by early 1942, with both sides regrouping for the next phase of the war. Zhukov's counteroffensive proved that the German army was not invincible. It boosted Soviet morale and showed that the USSR could organize large-scale operations even after catastrophic losses. It also marked the beginning of a long war of attrition on the Eastern Front, a conflict that would eventually lead to Germany's defeat. The Battle of Moscow became one of the most important turning points of World War II. For the first time, Hitler's army was stopped, and for the first time, the Red Army had seized the initiative.